Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, Chosen and Grounded. My name is Sydney and I've created this to be a loving and safe space where we can talk about life and the things happening around us from a loving, non-judgmental Christian perspective. I want to share stories. I want to share some of the personal conversations I've had with the Lord, and I would like to discuss some of the social issues affecting us right now. I would like to talk about and discuss some of the issues and topics I think the church has not addressed or hasn't taught well. But just wait, before you click off, this channel welcomes everyone regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation. It does not matter, you're welcome here. As I was doing the work preparing for this video, I figured that the best place to start would be my testimony, as I can't teach or discuss anything without being willing to discuss my life and what the Lord has brought me through. I was born in Davenport, Illinois, partly raised in Moline, Illinois, and grew up in Arizona with my mom, dad, little brother, and grandmother. My journey with the Lord started when I was 2 years old. I almost drowned in my grandmother's pool. I was 2 years old. It was Mother's Day. We were celebrating Mother's Day at my grandmother's house in Moline, Illinois, and it was in the dead end of winter. And somehow my grandmother had like a screen door, and then you got to like this porch area, and then there was the pool in the backyard. And somehow I got through the two doors. I went down the side, and by the time my family came out, I had already gone to the bottom and came back up. And my Uncle Alan swam into the icy pool to come get me, and my Uncle Brian squeezed me so hard water came out and I went to the hospital. By God's grace, I ended up okay. When I woke up, my mom said I asked for pancakes. But ever since that day, I was spiritually open. I had learned how to be grounded in what being in the present meant. I have ADD, so I always struggled in school. I used to have so much test anxiety, and so much anxiety if I didn't learn how to focus, that I stressed out and I prayed often, but my family always was supportive and God always told me it would be okay. I was great in every other class except math. Even when I was older, I maxed out tutoring for my math class in order to get my associate's degree. And when I was a kid, there was not very many kids around when I grew up. I was pretty lonely as a kid. I grew up around adults, so I was always more mature than people my age. And I was so sensitive to other people and the emotions of others around me. And every family has issues. And back then, my parents used to get into very intense arguments. And so I would try to make people happy. I try to make people happy around me. I tried to be the person that brings the joy into chaotic environments. And during that time, I wouldn't talk about my feelings. Instead, I heard that God always hears us and God's always there for us. So instead, I would always pray. Because it was just me and the Lord for company during those times. And even as a kid, I wouldn't tolerate being disrespected by anyone. I wouldn't tolerate being yelled at as a kid. The kind of attitude I had as a kid, it was, I'm sorry, were you talking to me? I know you were talking to me like that because I'm not the one. I'm not. Talk to me like that is the attitude I had as a kid. And so sometimes that can conflict with parents. But yeah, it was a challenge growing up. Sometimes the environment would be peaceful, sometimes it was very chaotic, and then during those times I would pray. And then when I was 8 years old, me, my mom, dad, and little brother, we moved to Georgia when I was 8. And I remember we went to this house, and it was so creepy. I swear this house looked like one of the scary movie houses that you just walk by. It was an empty neighborhood. It was quiet. It was eerie and creepy. And we walked into this giant house. And as soon as I approached the house, I could just see this really dark aura. And so we walk into the house, and as soon as I opened the door, I could see these demonic spirits. They were like shadows, and the house was crawling with bugs. And I remember just freaking out. I was crying. And so thankfully we didn't have to sleep the first night in the house. We got a hotel. But the next day we went to the house, and it was very uncomfortable being in the house because there was something evil there spiritually. There just was. And so we lived there. My mom went to work, and I spent most of the time in my room, and I felt uncomfortable. I started listening to the same songs over and over on a loop, and I remember seeing my dad get angrier and angrier and angrier, and I could just see the demonic forces in the house start to affect his behavior. And I remember praying, because I started battling this battle spiritually and alone. And I remember there was a time when I started having demonic dreams. I couldn't sleep. I remember constantly praying in the spirit realm, and there came a point where everything around me turned black. And I remember being on this ledge spiritually, and I remember praying and calling out to the Lord to save me. And at the last second, when I thought I wouldn't be able to hang on anymore, everything turned bright pink. Everything turned bright pink, and I remember seeing Jesus come to me, and he touched my heart right here. And after that, everything came back to normal. I was in the present. I was mentally, spiritually here. All the shadows went away, and I was saved. And ever since that day, I knew God was real. I knew God was real. Some people say, oh, it's just a mental breakdown, but God was there, and it was a spiritual thing. It wasn't a mental thing. It was spiritual, and God saved me that day. And after that, we had moved back home for a little bit. I had gone on a medicine that made me gain weight, and so ever since then I struggled with weight my whole life, constantly up and down. But we moved back home to Illinois for a little bit, and then we moved to Arizona. And at first, me being 8 years old, after being what I went through, I was like, why would we move again? I don't want to go through what I went through. But we moved to Arizona, and I'm so glad that I did, because we moved to Arizona when I was 8, and we moved when I was 16. So I spent most of my growing up developmental years in Arizona. So I consider Arizona to be home. And in Arizona is when I found my first home church. Mission Community Church is the church that I had grown up in. And it was at 8 years old at church camp that I decided to fully give my life to Jesus Christ, after being able to see how much he had saved me from already. And I thank you so much to anyone listening who took the time to listen this far. I wanted to tell my testimony, because even though people might be fake, even though people may not be great representatives, people might be fake, things might be not real, but Jesus, Yeshua, Christ is real. God is real. God does save. Jesus is real. I hope to use this channel to explain and separate the truth of God's word in the Bible from the hypocrisy and the mistakes the church has made that have caused church hurt, and because the church has failed so much showing God's love. We are called to love people. 1 Corinthians 13, 1 through 3. 1 Corinthians 13, 1 through 13. I think the church is waking up to a revival of the actual truth in the church, but I'd like to help clarify all the things I believe the church hasn't taught well or have completely missed the mark on, such as how awful the church has been to the LGBT community, So I thank you for listening. I thank you for taking the time. I hope you all have a blessed day. Bye, everyone.